Hi everyone, Nicholas Buffett is here from sunny Cyprus, a cold, still sunny Cyprus. Now, today's tutorial is all about pivot tables, and I'm going to be doing 3 worked examples with you. I'm going to be doing 3 because most of the tutorials out there focus on a sales spreadsheet. I'm going to be doing one of those as well, but I'm going to be doing another 2 worked examples with you, and these are going to be more focused on a school environment. One of them is going to be focused on data extracted from the school MIS, and the other one's going to be from data extracted from Microsoft Class Teams. I'm also going to be going over some pro tips with you. So even if you have used pivot tables before, then you're going to learn something new here, most likely, some excellent little tips as I'm working through these examples. And I'm also going to go over some do's and don'ts. Now, primarily the do's, because if you know what to do, then you will not be doing what you shouldn't be doing, if that makes sense. Oh, and by the way, if you did get this little joke up here, put a comment. Now, while you're putting that comment, you might as well click that subscribe button as well. So let's get started with this tutorial. Okay, so here we are. This is our first spreadsheet in this workbook. You can see we've got 3 spreadsheets here. The first one that we're going to work with is going to be with the sales one. Now, you can download this workbook from the description. So if you do go to the description of this video, you can go and download this workbook and you can work along with me or just use this for practice. All of this data is fictional data. None of it contains any personal data, so you can use it freely. Okay, so let's start off with the first and one of the most important things about creating a pivot table. And this is pro tip number 1. Now, the first thing is you need to convert your data range into a table. If you do not, then especially if you've got multiple people updating the data, then your pivot table, every time you're going to need to update it or to see that new data, you're going to have to adjust the range of data which that pivot table is using. However, if you do convert your range into a table first, your pivot table will be able to identify all new information which has been added either by you or by other people directly because it's a table. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to select our data range, go all the way to the bottom. Here's my range. And then from here, I'm now going to go to insert and I'm going to call this, I'm going to make it a table. Now just click on OK. And then we can now see here, it's given my table a default name. It's called it table 2. You can change it to something else. So let's say I change that to sales. It doesn't matter what you call your table. Now, if you want to select your table, you know something's a table is when you put your cursor in the top left corner, it should turn like that into a diagonal arrow. By clicking here, you select that table and you can see here the table name, sales. Great. So that's the first and most important step. The next step is we now need to generate a pivot table from this data. But before we do that, let's understand what this data is. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to expand all of these so we can see all the field names. So here we've got a column saying insurance type code. So this is for people selling insurances. So you've got different types of insurance. You've got an insurance description. So home is homeowner's insurance, the selling price for that insurance, a salesperson ID number, a salesperson name, the branch where they work at or the sales branch, and the date of the sale. So this is a box standard sales kind of spreadsheet. So now that we know what this is about, the next step will be, what information do I want this pivot table to give me? And this is the most important thing. This is where a lot of people struggle when they're trying to make a pivot table. They just try to make pivot tables to practice, but they don't know what information they want to get from the data. So knowing what you want is going to make your life a whole lot easier. So essentially for me, this is really hard for me to see and read if I want to be able to see how many sales have been made by each branch, for example, and by which salesperson. How many sales did each person make? What was the total made by each salesperson and by each branch? We can, of course, do all of this using functions like count, count if, sum if, and sum ifs and count ifs, but that's going to be tedious and quite a bit of hard work, and we're going to have to organize and play around with it quite a while to make it look the way that we want it to look. So what we're going to do, we're going to use pivot tables instead. So click anywhere inside the table. And from here again, you can go to insert. And here you've got pivot table. Simply click on that button. And now we're going to choose to add the pivot table as a new worksheet. So just click on OK. And there we go. It's made a pivot table for us already. That's it. That's most of the work done, to be honest. Now then, down here we can see we've got the new sheet. It's called sheet 1. I'm just going to double click on that. I'm going to call that P sales for pivot table sales, only because I'm going to be doing another 2 examples here, and just so I can tell which pivot table is for which data source. So here's my pivot table. Click on that and we were going to see automatically the fields list here appear. If it doesn't, then by clicking on the pivot table here and you go to pivot table analyze, you've got the field list which you can enable and disable. And because we're going to be using this a lot, that's why for the first time I've actually shifted myself a little bit more over to the center of the screen. Okay, so let's get started with creating this. We can see in here, in the fields list here, we've got all the fields from my spreadsheet. Okay, the insurance type, the description, selling price, so on and so forth. At the bottom, we've got 4 areas. And depending where we drag any one of these fields into these 4 areas, that's where it's going to appear in my pivot table. So the first thing I want to do is I want to have a list of my branches. Okay, so I want the list of the branches so that I can see the sales made from each branch. So if we look at here, the branch, the sales branch, if I click and drag that into the rows, that automatically adds, and we can see here now, the branches that we have. Okay, if I don't want the branches to be as rows, so we can list things downwards, I can click and drag it from rows and put it into columns. And that's going to put my branches of columns. And this is a beautiful thing about pivot tables. You can play around with it until it looks and shows you the information the way you want it to look. I'm going to leave that as rows for now. The next thing I want to do is to have a sum of all the sales made by each branch. So that's simple enough. I've got my selling price, and in this area in the bottom right corner, I've got values, and you can see that sum function there. So I could put here, just click on the selling price and just drag that down into values, and automatically it's done what we would have to do, a sum if for each one of these locations, and it's already added the total here for me from each branch. If I wanted the average sales of that, then there is a couple of ways of doing this, but I like this method, so I'll show you my method. From here, I can click on the little arrow and I can go to value field settings and I can change this from sum to a count. Let's say count how many sales instead of the total, the max, the min, the product. Let's say I do the average and click OK. This is the average sales. So automatically it's identified how many sales by each branch, the total sales, and calculated the average for me. I'm just going to change that back to sum. Okay. The next thing I want to do is I also want to include the people which have actually made the sales. Okay, so I'm going to put my salesperson name and I'm going to drag that down here as well under sales branch. And you can see now here we've got for each branch all the salespersons as well. Fantastic. If I wanted it the other way around, then I can switch these. I can put sales branch here. I can drag that down underneath so person name is at the top and it changes it around. So first sorting order is going to be the salesperson and then the branch. That's not very useful, is it? So I'm just going to switch that up. Now, if I wanted, let's say, the salesperson name and then the branch as columns, I can simply drag this into columns. And now I can see my data in this fashion. Okay, so it really depends on how you want to show this data. And the beautiful thing is you can just play around with this until you have, the look that you want, how that information is displayed in the best possible way for you. So I'm just going to leave this as salespersons under branch like this. Okay. All right. The next thing that I want to do is I want to put some filtering in here. So we can see at the top, actually, before I do that, here's my next pro tip for you. You can see here it says row labels. This is really, really annoying. So if you've worked with pivot tables before, you know how annoying this is. I can change that, for example, and change that to sales branch. up here. But instead of doing that, what you can do is you can go to up here, pivot table, analyze. Actually, so go to the design. Let's just click on there. Go to the design in the pivot table. And over here, you've got report layout. Click on that, and you can say show in tabular form. And look at that. It now gives you sales branch instead of that silly title. So that's really good. The next thing I'm going to do is I can see here for each one of these, I've got this little drop down filtering list where I can filter, for example, and only show, let's say, Chicago. Okay, that's simple enough. That's absolutely fantastic. So I can get rid of that filter, but that's kind of tricky to work with and does require some people to have a little bit more knowledge and understanding of filters. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a slicer. So I'm just going to add a new row here. I'm going to right click on column A, insert, so I can put my slicer on the left here. Clicking inside my pivot table opens up the field list over here. And for the sales branch, I'm going to right click on that and I'm going to say add as slicer. And here is my slicer here. Let's just make that a little bit narrower and just drag that over here to the left. Okay, so now simply by clicking on this, I can see the results for Chicago, Houston, New York, Phoenix, really easily, no need to bother with filters. I can remove the filters, I can choose multiple selections. So this is, let's say, Chicago and New York only, and get rid of the filter. So that just makes it a bit easier for some people to work with. The next thing I want to do is I also want to add, let's say, a sum of, what should we do? The selling price we've got, let's do a sum of the tax owed. So here we're going to add what we call a new field. Okay, we want to create a new field based on data we already have. Now, from here, I'm going to go to my pivot table analyze, and then I've got field items and sets. I'm going to click on this. I'm going to choose a calculated field. From here, I'm going to change this to, let's say, for tax. And from the formula, I'm going to delete what's inside the formula. I'm going to choose my selling price. I'm going to insert the field or double click. It doesn't matter. And I'm going to multiply that with, let's say, 19%, so 0.19. I want to find what 19% of that selling price is because that's what I owe tax. Okay. I'm just going to click on add. Now, automatically, if I click on close, we can see down here, I've now got the tax and it's already added it here for me, sum of tax. Fantastic. All right, there we go. So if I didn't want that, I can simply click and drag it away or throw it over here, or I could just click on this and just put it anywhere I want. So that's how you create a calculated field based on data you already have. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to be able to, and I love this feature, by the way, I want to be able to choose, for example, a date period to see the sales within that date period. So to do that, I'm going to need to add my date of sale and add that as a filter. So here are my filters in the area here. I'm just going to click on the date field and I'm going to drag that into filters. And there it is there, date of sale. Now I'm just going to insert a new row above that. Okay, I'm just going to put a couple more rows here. You're going to see why in a second. And now from here, I can easily select here a date, but that's not giving me a date range. And I can select multiple items if I want, but that's not what I want. I want an easy way to select the date range. Now, because I've added date of sale as a filter, if I now right click on date of sale here, and from here I say add as timeline. Look at this, it gives me a fantastic little timeline here. So I'm just going to drag that number one down here. Just make a bit more raw. I'm going to put this at the top. This is why I dragged it down earlier. Okay, so from here now, I can very easily select the date range. So if I want to see all sales which were in 2020-24, now it's only going to show you the date range of where there are dates. So you can't go back, let's say, to 2001 because there are no sales in 2001. So it goes from the earliest date to the latest date from your date range. And of course, this will update when you add data. So if I just say I want all the sales in the months of June and July, let's say, let go. And now I only see the sales June and July. And if I click on Houston, these are all the sales. So let's get rid of that, get rid of the multiple and just put Houston. So these are all the sales for Houston, only within the months June and July. Fantastic, so easy to work with. So I'm just going to get rid of that and get rid of that. Okay, the next thing that I want to do is I also want to see how many sales each person here has done. So I'm going to do a count on the salesperson. So again, from my field list over here, I'm going to take the salesperson name and I'm going to drag that down here into the values. Okay. And now what it's done, it's already done count for me. Can you see that? So I'm just going to expand this as well and make these so that they are text wrapped, only so they take up a bit less space. So we've got a pivot table which gives a lot of information, really easy for us to filter. There are some extra things here it's added for us. For example, here we can see the total for each branch. If I didn't want that to be visible, I can simply right click on that and say subtotal sales branch, remove that tick. And if I go down to the bottom, if I don't want the grand total for each one of these columns, I can right click and then just get rid of, remove grand total. Okay, but I'm going to add them. I find them quite useful. The other thing we can also do is we can format data. So I can select data and I can format it like I would normally do. Let's say get rid of decimal places. I can format the currency. So if I want this to be, I don't know, something else like an English pound, click on OK. So you can, if I want it percentages, it's entirely up to you. All right. So the formatting is the same as you would normally do in Excel. All right, the next step, I'm going to show you how we can very easily create a new pivot table in the same spreadsheet, and then it's going to be disassociated from the filters. So I'm going to click anywhere inside this particular pivot table. I'm going to go to pivot table analyze. From here, I can go to select. There's select. I'm going to select the entire pivot table. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to press Control C to copy and then click over here on the left and Control V to paste. So that's giving me a copy of this same pivot table. Now, why am I doing this? Well, maybe I want to create a chart which is based on different information and not this first pivot table, but on this second pivot table. So on here, what I want to do, I only want the salesperson. So I'm going to get rid of the branch. And again, this is why it's important to know what it is, what information it is that you want to display. Because once you've got that, you know exactly what you want to do. I don't want this date of sale filter here, so I can get rid of that. I want the sum. I don't want the tax, so I can get rid of the tax from here. Just click and drag that up there. So the next thing I'm going to do is this. Let's have a look and see how the filters affect this pivot table. So if I click here on Houston, it's also affecting this pivot table as well. That's great if that's what you want. If I don't want this slicer here to affect this pivot table, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply click anywhere inside this pivot table to select it. At the top where we've got slicer, we can now go to report connections. And here we can see all of the pivot tables in the spreadsheet. I don't want it to affect this one here, pivot table 4. Inside the sheet P sales. Click on OK. So now when I filter this, you can see it's not filtering this pivot table, only the one on the left. That. And if you've got, let's say, another filter, then you can also do the same. Let's say with the date sales, if I click on that and go to my timeline, I can go to report connections, and here it's affecting both pivot tables. So if I don't want it to affect the other pivot table, then I can just remove the tick and that would also work. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a chart on this data here. So I'm going to click anywhere inside here. I don't need this. I'm going to get rid of this fields area here, so there's a little bit more space. So what I'm going to go to pivot table analyze and just remove that field list, so I could put my table here. So click anywhere inside this table, this pivot table here. We're going to go to insert. We're going to go to our column chart, and that automatically creates a column chart for us. And if we modify the date, that date range, all of that is going to change as well, because we said that this filter here will also affect this pivot table, which affects this chart as well. I can modify the chart like I would normally do. So if I want the count to be a line instead of a column, I can right click on my chart, go to change chart type, go to combo. Here's my count of sales. That's a line, but the number's quite small. So I'm going to make a secondary axis for that and click on OK. So now as I modify this, that will change. And if I want to connect my slicer to also affect, I'm going to click on the slicer, go to slicer, report connections, connect it to my pivot table 4. And now this is the sales only for Houston, only the salespersons for this date of range here from March through to the end of June. Wow, fantastic. Now, the only thing that I haven't shown you is how you can manage the filters. Now, I have shown you individually how you can do this, this timeline here, but you do also have, if you click on any pivot table, you can go to pivot table, analyze from your filter connections here. You've got the date of sales and the sales branch. Okay, so by clicking on pivot table, you choose whether that one will actually affect it or not. So if I click on this one here, go to filter connections, and I can say date of sale will not affect this. Click on OK, and that will remove it. So this does affect it, but the date of sale will not, like so. Okay, so that's another way of doing it, probably an easier way, because you've got access to all of the different types of filters. You simply click on the pivot table you want, and then from here, from your filter connections, you can see which filters will affect that pivot table. So here's our second example. This is based on the information from a management information system of a school, and this is an export from the actual MIS. Now, this particular export is all about detentions given to students for whatever reason. It might be they didn't do their homework, or they were misbehaving, or something like that. The information is recorded into the MIS, and here we've got an export where we as school staff would like to base some decisions or make some decisions based on all of this data. Well, not on the data, but the information we can get from this data. And we can see that this data is quite a lot of data here in this spreadsheet, and it's really hard to grill through all of this to actually get some useful info from here. Now we can do it, but usually that will mean we're going to copy this data into another spreadsheet. We're going to get rid of the unnecessary columns. We're going to have to use functions and just modify a little bit here and a little bit there so we can make it look or display the information in a way that's usable to whoever needs this information. But now what we're going to do, we're going to make a nice interactive dashboard, which is going to be really user friendly and easy for somebody to navigate and just draw new information from. So let's begin. The first step is going to be to change this range into a table. Remember, always use a table because that's going to update. And I'm going to try and show you this in this part of the tutorial. So I'm going to click on the first cell. I'm going to go all the way down, go to the very last cell, hold the shift button and click. That selects my data range. Now from here, I'm going to, again, just like before, we're going to go to insert and we're going to choose table and click OK, and that's generated a default table for us. So this table is now set up. The next thing we need to do is click anywhere inside this table, go to insert and choose pivot table. Click OK. It's found the table range. The name of the table is called table 3. We're going to make it as a new worksheet and click OK. So here is my pivot table already generated for me. Now, once again, it's always good to have a clear view of what it is that we want this pivot table to show. And once we have that, it's really easy to make. So what I want to do is to have a clear picture of all the students, how many detentions they've received, but I also want to be able to see the detentions per year group so that I can see which year group is actually being the most disruptive or the most misbehaved. So the first thing I'm going to need to do is to add the student name. So over here where I've got my field list, again, from the pivot table analyze, we can add or remove that field list. There's the button there. I'm going to add the full name. So I'm just going to click on that and I'm going to put that as rows. So there's my list of students. Again, we can see this really annoying row label thing here that it just makes no sense. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to design while I'm in the pivot table, click on the pivot table, go to design, and again, we're going to go to report layout and choose the tabular form. And that will give the field name instead of that random name. Now, the next thing is I also want to include the form group. I want to what year each student is in. So there I'm going to go to my year group. Here it is. Now, if I add it down here into rows, it looks like this. So for each student, it has their year as well. That's a little bit confusing. I could move it to the top and have all the students like this, all the students separated by year group. That's a bit easier to view. But what I'm going to do, I've only got a maximum of 7 year groups. So I'm just going to put the year groups. I'm going to drag this over here to the columns. And that's going to put my years across that way. Okay. And that's just going to be so much easier to see. I like that. So I'm going to keep that method. Now, the next thing is I want to do a count of how many detentions each student has actually been given. Now, over here in the MIS information, we can see here every student, every detention is recorded once. So I can do a count on any single one of these fields, providing it's a field that definitely has something in each record. For example, I can't use ethnicity because sometimes ethnicity here is not included. It hasn't got any data in, so it will skip that data. But one that is included all the time is the student's full name or the student's full surname. So I'm just going to use that one. So I'm already using the full name, but I can use it again and put it down here, and it's going to do a count. Again, because it's data, it does a count automatically. If it was numerical data, for example, the full name is not numerical data, so it's just doing a count. But if it was numerical data in there, I could do things like average, max, min, sum, so on and so forth. So that we simply click on the little arrow there and go to value field settings. Now, that already is giving me so much information. I can straight away here see that the year group, which is the most problematic, is year 9, because they've got all in total 20 detentions. Naughty year 9s. Now, I can see here my grand total. This is kind of tricky to see who is the highest and who is the lowest. So I can click anywhere, right click on any one of these, and then I'm just going to do a quick sort. So if I go to sort and I put largest to smallest, there we go. And that's going to put the largest number at the top. We can see that Jason Skouros here is the student has got the most detentions up until now. And that student is actually in year 9. And I can see here, year 9 has got a total of 20 detentions. All right, well, already some really, really useful information. That's something for administration to have a look at, or from certain departments of the school to have a look at, not the administration, to go and see why is year 9 so disruptive, and this student and these two students here in particular. I could also very easily click here and just add some conditional formatting as well. Let's just put a color scale there if I wanted to. Let's just click on that one, and I can see like the highest is green and lowest is red. And you can do anything you would normally do in a spreadsheet. I'll undo that. Okay, the next thing is I want to add some filtering to make this a little bit easier to work with. So I'm just going to add a couple of rows here. I'm just going to add one row there. And then clicking on this table, the first filter I want to do, I want to filter my year group. So I'm just going to take the year group and I'm going to make that a slicer actually. So I'm just going to right click on it, add as a slicer. There it is there. I'm going to modify my slicer settings up here. I'm going to make it, instead of a column, one column with all of the year groups. I'm going to put it across. So I'm just going to increase the columns to, let's say, 7 and just stretch that out. There we go. And now I can let's just add a couple of rows there so it fits everything nicely for us. There we go. I'm just going to put that at the top. And now very easily I can click on here and choose a year group and filter that down really quickly. Or I can just compare, for example, key stage 3. So just get rid of 12, 10, and 11 and just leave 7, 8, and 9. Okay, so there we go. I'm also going to add the date. Again, I really do love this timeline from the date. So I'm just going to go to the date when a detention was recorded. I'm going to click on that and I'm going to add that as a filter. Okay, there it is there. And once I've added it as a filter, I am able now to right click on this and choose add it as a timeline. And I really do like these timelines, I've got to be honest. I'm just going to drag that down, just put my timeline here, make that a bit bigger. And that now allows me to go ahead and just drill a little bit more into this data. Let's have a look. So I can, for example, say, well, let's go have a look at the month of September. Now we can see in September, year 8 was actually had more detentions than year 9. And then when we go to October, we can see year 8 only had 2 detentions and year 9 had 9 detentions. So we can see an improvement in year 8, but we've got a slight problem here in year 9. So again, using these pivot tables, it's really easy to identify trends, and that way we can make decisions based on the information we see from these pivot tables. Okay, what else can we do? I'm also going to put gender on here, I think. So I'm going to put a filter on gender, because we can also see whether which students, is it male or female students, causing, getting more detention. So if I drill down to male, I can now see that 15 of the 20 interval. Let's get rid of the date field there. So in total, there are 51 detentions by males, and if I go to female, only 11. So we can see here this trend of the males actually getting more detentions than the females. So next thing I'm going to do is we're going to see how we can actually update our pivot table if new data is added. So I'm going to jump over here to my MIS detentions list here. I'm going to go to the next record, make sure it is the next record. So 63, 64, there it is. I'm just going to add my information there. So can you see it turns out alternating band into blue. Okay, I'm just going to put this same date here. I'm just going to copy all of this information here and just put it for myself as well. Okay, but this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I am year 13. Now, year 13 currently we can see is not included. We don't have any detentions from year 13. So if I do add this here now, I'm in year 13. And what else do we have? Let's just change that to 13. So we can see up here in this slicer, we don't have year 13 included because there was no detentions from year 13 students. And at the same time, we don't have year 13 as a group here. So how can we have this updated? Now, we said there are two methods, and the two methods are, the first one is going to be, if I click anywhere on my pivot table, I can go to pivot table analyze. And from here, I've got refresh. I could click here and click on refresh all. Okay, that's the first method. I'll do that now. And you can now see year 13 is here. And if I scroll down here, you can see, there you go, there's a year 13 with one, and there's me with my detention. If you have other colleagues which are updating a spreadsheet or some data, then you don't know when they've updated that for you to keep going back and click refresh. So to ensure every time you open your workbook with the pivot table inside, to make sure that it is updated immediately, because it will not update unless you choose refresh, you have to go to pivot table, analyze. From here, you've got options. I'm going to go to options. From here, we're going to go to data. And here it says refresh data when opening the file. So whenever you open your workbook, that is going to be refreshed. Now, this is only for this pivot table. Okay, now if this one over here, the one that we did before, so from here, you're going to go to pivot table. You can click on the options button directly. And then from here, you're going to go to data and click on refresh data when opening the file. Now, if I do that, it's going to give me this message, say the changes to refresh on open option also change the option for other pivot table reports based on the same source data. So if any other pivot tables are based on that particular table, which we did here, then they're going to be affected as well. So let's go back to this one. So it's always good when you create the pivot table, make sure that you do go to your pivot table options and do that. The other method of accessing the options is right clicking on the pivot table. Here you've got pivot table options, and again, you've got the data option here. It's exactly the same thing. Okay, so with that done, we've seen how we can refresh. I'm just going to click on my pivot table again. I'm going to go to pivot table analyze. I'm going to go to select entire pivot table. I'm going to Control C to copy, go down here and paste. And now I'm just going to make another pivot table in the same sheet like I did before, so I can create a chart based on some information which is not going to affect this information. So I can have different pivot tables showing different data. First of all, I'm going to get rid of this slicer. I don't need that. I'm going to get rid of some of these filters. So I don't need the filters that I've got here, the date and the gender. I don't want to use that one. And then I'm going to get rid of that one as well. And I'm only going to put the full name here for a filter. So I can go down to full name if I wanted to. And then from here, I'm going to put for my rows, and I'm not going to put the columns, get rid of that. And I'm just going to leave that one there, count or full name. Now for the rows, what I'm going to have, I'm going to put the year group. Again, it all comes down what it is you want to, and then the date when this detention was given. So I can see a chart that's going to show me over a period of time the dates. Now, as soon as you put a date, it's going to put the month, the days, and the date. And the good thing about this is you can drill down. So if I go to October, you can see there was only one here in October. If I go to November, it shows you the days, so the 8th and the 26th for the year 10, and then for the other year groups as well. And if you drill down to this, it will show you the actual dates. Okay, I think date is too much, so I'm just going to get rid of that one. And then I've got the count as well. Now I'm going to create a chart, but I'm going to collapse these first. I don't want these, so I'm going to right click on any one of these, go to expand, collapse, and that's going to collapse. Oh, let's collapse all of them. Collapse entire field. There we go. Okay, so from my chart, click anywhere in the pivot table. It doesn't matter where. I'm going to go to insert chart, create a column chart, and there you go. So let's just get rid of this field list here to give me a little bit more space. Let's make that a bit bigger. And that's now really easy to see. And now I can very easily see over a period of time my chart here. I've got a full names filter. So if I just go to Brown Olivia, let's have a look at that. I can see here when detentions were. So let's go have a look at that one student that was actually doing quite a lot. I think it was Skuros. There we go. Okay, so we can see that, he's quite consistent in getting detentions every month here. Okay, but probably more active here in October. But we can see a decline from October, November, December. So that's actually a good thing. That's something we can actually praise the student on because he's obviously behaving a little bit better. Okay, that was example 2. We've seen that. So just quickly, again, if I click on this pivot table here, I can go to my pivot table, analyze. From here, I can go to my filter connections and see which filters are affecting, which ones are not. If I do want the year group to be affecting this one as well, I can click on that, click OK. I can remove that filter. And now when I use this filter here to show, let's say for only years 7, 8, and 9, so key stage 3, it's going to affect this one as well. And this is my chart only for key stage 3. So let's go to our third and final example, and this is to do with a Teams export. So this is Microsoft Teams class notebook. Okay, so first of all, let's see how we can extract this data from Microsoft Class Teams. First step is go to your Microsoft Class Team, go to the General section here, and there you will see this Grades tab. Click on that, and that's going to show you all the assignments that you've issued your students over the period that this class team has existed and all the grades and everything there. And you can drill down and get some really useful information directly from here. Now, this is just the test team, so you're not going to see a lot there. But to extract this information, you've got this button here, Export to Excel. Simply click on that, and it's going to export the information as an Excel file. And then what you actually get is something that looks like this. So this is actually really good. Actually, it's not that bad, but again, really hard to get some useful information. We can see here it's already given me slicers with the assignments, so I can actually filter based on assignments very easily. And I've also got students which I can filter down on as well. So I can click on each assignment and just see each assignment individually. And I can just choose students individually and see what they did as well. But again, this is hard to get information and see trends. So what we're going to do is we're going to use what we export from there and make a pivot table from it. Now, the good thing about this is we don't need to convert this as a table. This is already a table. One way I can tell is if I simply put my mouse in the top left corner here where it says full name, can you see that diagonal pointing down arrow? That means it's a table. And if I click on there, it selects the whole table. So all I have to do is simply click on here and then go to Insert, Pivot Table. Here's my table range. It's called Table, New Worksheet, and click on OK. So this one here is now called Sheet 2. I'm just going to call this P Teams. And the previous one that I did, I'm just going to change that to P D10 for detention or MIS. Okay, and that just makes it easy for me to see which one is which. So I'm working on this one now. So I've got my pivot table based on the exported file from Microsoft Teams. Here are all the fields which were present there, and I'm going to now create something which is a little bit more interactive and I'll be able to get more information from. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I need the student's full name. So I'm just going to click on full name and drag that down as a row. Now, the next thing that I want to do is I want to see the assignments. So I'm just going to click on the assignments and drag that down. And again, now this is by student by assignment. So first the priority student, and then it drills down into each assignment for each student. I'm going to do this the other way around. I think I could do it the other way around. Let's put it like that. I can do it by assignment and have the students in there. This is entirely up to you. So I'm just going to leave it as it was. I want the first name and then that information there. Okay, and the reason why, again, it's always important to know what it is that you want to do, what you want this pivot table to show you. You could play around and then decide, but if you do have an idea of what you want it to show you, then this is good. And the reason why I preferred it this way is because I'm going to be filtering down based on assignments and probably on the timeline, because this is a 2-year course. And I'm going to reduce that timeline to show me the assignments between a certain date range. So I'm going to have less assignments here, and that's going to make it a bit easier to see. So that's the first part. Now, the next thing I want to do is to get the average score. Now, down here, we've got the percent here. So this is the percentage, the overall percentage that students got. And if we have a look at this, we can come over here and see. So you get the points, okay? And then you get the maximum points. So you can see all of my ones are graded from 100 points. It just makes working with percentages so much easier. Okay, and then it shows you the percent. Now, what is this percent? So let's say I had 50 points here and this was 25, then that's going to be 25 marks out of 50, so that will be 50%. But because I'm working with 100 points max, then whatever grade they got, it's actually the percentage as well. So I'm just going to work with this percentage value here, which Teams will automatically generate for me. So it's okay if you're not grading out of 100. Teams will actually give you the percentage equivalent. So I'm going to use that. I'm going to get my percent. I'm going to drag this down. I'm not going to do a sum this time. I want to get the average percentage. So I'm just going to click on that little arrow there, view field settings, and just choose average. This is the average percentage. Now you can see this is giving me the percentage values out of 1. So I'm going to select all of this data and I'm going to format it. So up here it's got general. I'm just going to click here percentage. So that's going to show me percentage instead of just those decimal values. Okay, great. And again, I can add decimal points as well if I want to. I'm not sure if there are any, so let's have a look. No, there's 0, 0. So I might as well just leave them like that. Okay. Now, the next thing is I want to add a little bit of interactivity here. So I want to be able to filter. So I'm just going to insert a column here. And clicking on here, I'm going to add a slicer. The slicer is going to be on assignments. So let's just do a right click here, add a slicer. And I'm just going to expand that here and put my assignments right there. Just drag it down so I can see all of the assignments. There we go. Okay, and now I'm going to remove that filter. Oop. There we go. So I've got that there, and that just gives me an easy way to do assignments. So if I just want to see how they did on this count and sum functions, click on that. So it only shows me the student and just that one there. If I want multiple assignments to be viewed, let's say everything to do with Excel, count and sum functions, and do I have anything else with Excel? Sum and count if. So there you go. I can see their total score now, their average percentage very easily and quickly based on only the papers or the assessments on Excel. All right, next step. I'm going to add a filter based on name. So I'm going to insert a new row at the top. I always tend to do this. I always add like a couple of rows at the top, and that just allows me to put things in like other slices. So I'm going to put the students in here as well. So full name, right click, add slicer. I've only got 9 students, so I'm just going to make this slicer here. Again, there's 9 students. I'm going to make it 9. Go. I'm just going to add that at the top up here. There we go. And I can now just click on and just see very easily just one student's results, either all of them or just one of them. And this is fantastic. If you're doing like teacher parent review days or consultation meetings and you've got this pivot table, you can just click on the student and you can actually even share your screen with that parent if it's remote, and that parent can very quickly and easily see that information. Okay, so that's another fantastic way of doing that. Then the last thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to add this again. I'm going to add my date filter. So this is going to be the date. So where do we have that? It's the due date in Teams. So we're just going to put that as a filter. There it is there. And I'm going to right click on that and add that as a timeline. I really do like this timeline, guys. And you can see how many times I'm using it. I think it's just a fantastic feature. So I'm just going to drag that a bit further down, add my timeline up here. You can spend some time and make this a bit neater. But the good thing with this right now is this. So these are all the tests. If I just get rid of all these filters, these are all the assessments that I given to students for my class. But because it's a 2-year course, it's a GCSE course, then it's split over 2 years. So if I want to see the performance for this term actually started in, so let's just move over, September of 2024, there. And we're up to December right now. And now I can see all the results which are to do only with this term. So this is all the assessment I've given my students here over that particular term. And if I want to reduce it down, let's say only the ones from, let's say, November to December, there you go. I've done 3 assessments. Okay, so really easy. I love this slicer. It's really, if I want to see their performance over the previous term, then I could go back and just do this like this and just go backwards and see what they did there. And let's remove that filter. And again, if you want to see multiple assessments and compare them, you can just click them from this slicer. Now, the last thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a chart in here very quickly. So I'm going to click on this. And then from here, I'm going to go to insert. I'm going to put a bar chart. And let's just put a bar chart here. There we go. Let's get rid of that field list. So if I want to see all the information quickly to do with the last part of the term, let's take that all the way up to here. Let's say September to there. And I only want to see for a particular student. Let's say Aiden. There we go. And this is very easily and quickly show me that information only for Aiden, only for that period there. And if I want to reduce the test, let's say I'm only going to look at the Excel tests or anything to do with Excel. So let's just choose multiple, count, sum functions, Excel, and conditional formatting. There we go. And I can see the average percentage on those tests. Add things. Now, the one thing that I haven't done with this one here, and I need to do again every single time I'm going to do this, I'm going to go to pivot table analyze. We're going to go to the options, make sure the data refreshes whenever the Excel workbook is open. That's the first one. The next one, I'm going to do this row labels here again. I'm going to go to design view. I'm going to go to my report layout. I'm going to make that into tabular form. Okay, and let's just get rid of those filters for now. And that just makes everything so much easier to work with. Things will get updated if somebody adds information, then we open our spreadsheet. And again, if I want to do a manual refresh, go to pivot table, analyze, refresh all, and that will update everything for us. Wow, that was a lot. So, yeah, first of all, if you did like this, if you have learned something new, whether you've used pivot tables or not in the past, or you're just learning right now and you enjoyed this, you found this useful, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe. That's the first thing. So let's just do a quick recap on those pro tips that we need to do and the do's and don'ts. So the first thing is always use a table. Convert your data to a table because that way it will update. The second one is you need to go to the options. So you need to go to the options from the pivot table analyze, go to options and choose data and make sure it refreshes the data whenever you open your workbook, or you could refresh manually. The next one is these really pesky, annoying field names here. We adjust those to put the actual field name by clicking on design, going to report layout and show in tabular form. The next one is we did in the sales one, we generated a new field. So again, from pivot table design, you can create new fields by going to field, items, and sets, and you can do a new calculated field. And that's basically going to generate a new field based on data you already have. Now, if we want to create a new table, a new pivot table based on a pivot table that we already have, then the easiest way to do that is you can simply click on the pivot table, go to pivot table analyze, go to select, and you can choose entire pivot table, copy and paste that down. Now, the other thing that we did was, if we look at the sales one, we also had these slicers. So if you want a slicer to affect a second pivot table as well, or not to affect it by selecting the slicer, you can go to slicer up here and go to report connections and add a pivot table or remove it. If it's a filter that we've got here, the best way is just go to pivot table analyze, and from here you have now your filter connections, and then from here you see which filters are affecting that pivot table, and you would do this for each pivot table. So I could say this pivot table here is affected by these filters, but this one here, if I click on that one, pivot table analyze, and I go to my filter connections, you can see date of sale is not affecting that. Okay, so there's a lot of information there for you, a lot of you to play around, a lot of things for you to play around with. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Again, if you have, you learned something new, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you again in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.